Have you ever wondered why kids can be so violent sometimes? On a survey on 50 kids in my school, grades 7 to 12, taken on December 4, 2015, about 55% of the students said violence in video games should be banned from kids who are not old enough to play them. Violence in video games can have negative effects on kids who are not old enough to play them. Violence in video games has negative effects on a kid's life. There are some consequences that the kids face when they play these games, and these games have many solutions to these problems. I want you to realize the negative effects that violence in video games has on the young kids who play them. How many kids do you know that play violent video games that aren't old enough to play them? According to videogames.procon.org, last updated on September 23, 2015, violent video games encourage violence and reward violent behavior. When kids play these violent video games, they have a sense of power over the other players. When they win or kill somebody, they feel mighty and that they are the best. This pattern slowly becomes an addiction because the kids feel that they need to play and experience these feelings every day. Several peer-related studies have shown that children who play M-rated games are more likely to bully, cyberbully their peers, get into physical fights, be hostile, argue with teachers, and show aggressions towards their peers throughout the school year. Video games often require players to simulate violence, such as stabbing, shooting, dismembering somebody with an axe, sword, or chainsaw, or other weapons. Game controllers are so sophisticated that the games are so realistic that simulating the violence enhances the learning of these violent behaviors. 2 teenagers in Tennessee who shot at a passing car and killed the driver told the police that they got the idea from playing Grand Theft Auto 3. Bruce Barlow, professor of psychology at the University of Missouri, spoke about the effects of stimulating violence. More than any other media, these violent video games encourage active participation in violence. From a psychological perspective, video games are excellent teaching tools because they reward players for engaging in certain types of behaviors. Unfortunately, in many popular video games, the behavior is violence. This is a bad thing because according to PAMF.org, in June 2014, most video games contain violence in some way. Violence in video games don't show kids any good morals. If you shoot somebody in one of these games, you don't go to jail, you don't get penalized in some way, you just get extra points. This doesn't mean that your child will go out into the world and shoot somebody, but they do use more aggressive language, they use more aggressive images, they have less ability to control their anger, and they externalize things in violent ways. Violence in video games has negative effects on kids that play them, and there are also many problems that come from them. According to Raises Smart Kids, published in 2015, kids can become socially isolated when they play these games. Also, they may spend less time in other activities such as doing homework, reading, sports, and interacting with their friends and family. These video games may also have bad effects on some children's health, including obesity, video-induced seizures, muscular and skeletal disorders such as tendinitis and carpal tunnel syndrome. Furthermore, the American Psychological Association says playing violent video games correlates to children being less caring and helpful to their peers, and these effects happen just as much for non-aggressive children as do they for children who already have aggressive tendencies. Children spend a great deal of time with violent video games at exactly the ages they should be learning healthy ways to relate to other people and to resolve conflicts peacefully. According to National Institute of Media and the Family, it's not just a concern when it becomes young children. Teenage brains are in the midst of growth spurts, making teens very impressionable. Just when teens are wiring their circuits of self-control, responsibility, and relationships that they will carry with them in adulthood, violent video games activate their anger center while dampening their conscience. Academic achievements may be negatively affected by playing too much of these games. Studies have shown that more time a kid spends playing these video games, the poorer his or her performance is in school. A study by Argosy University's Minnesota School on Professional Psychology found that video games addicts argue a lot with their teachers, fight a lot with their friends, and score lower grades than others who play video games less often. Other studies show that many game players other players skip their homework and play games, and many students admit that their violent game habits are often responsible for their lower test grades. There are many consequences that come from this problem, but there are some solutions to this problem. According to drphil.com, published in 2015, there are many different things parents can do if their kids have aggressive behaviors after playing these violent video games. Parents can read the games before they purchase them. Every video and computer game should be rated for age appropriateness on the front of the packaging. Some games also have labels with the content descriptions on the back of the packaging. They should be sure to read both the labels in order to determine whether the game is of age appropriate for their child and whether it contains material that you would wish your kid to be exposed to. The parent can rent the game before they buy it. This will give a parent a better chance to see what the game has on it and see whether or not they would want their kid to be playing it. Lastly, parents need to know what his or her child is like. Different children handle things differently. If your child becomes aggressive or unsettled after playing violent video games, you should probably think twice before you go and purchase a violent video game for your child. Kids that play violent video games have an increasing amounts of aggressive behavior. Studies have shown that bullying results from violent video games. Kids that play these games don't learn the right morals in life. These games show kids that it is normal to do the stuff they see on the screen. Social skills and academic achievements have been diminishing in the kids because they become very addicted to these games, and they have to play them all the time. Violence in video games has negative effects on the kids that play them.